Okay, so we've done 12 teams so far. I just have this team left and my own left, so we'll do this last team. It's easy enough. It's 13. It's Eileen, so pretty simple. This is football team football team. So yeah, we'll start things off. First, her theme, kind of like the cat team for Charlotte. Her theme was get as many felons on the team as possible. So Team Felons. There are some really good guys on this team though, but I guess I digress. I don't want to check one thing, but I know like for example, she took Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts is like one of the best dudes in the NFL. Super nice guy. I think he had the first female agent to negotiate a $100 million contract. I also know, what is it? Like Josh Jacobs is like another really good dude. But anyway, we won't get too deep into that. More of the joke teams. So, 10th overall, $42, Joe Mixon. So Mixon is basically, he's been at Cincinnati for a while, and he's been like a volume-driven, like, workhorse. I guess we'll say a workhorse back in Cincinnati. He's not exactly the most efficient runner, but he's typically pretty healthy, and he just like wears you down as the season or a game wears on. I want to say last year he was like the 5th overall fantasy running back, so he was pretty high. It wasn't a surprise to me that Cincinnati moved on. They just didn't really want to pay him, and he got a pretty nice extension in Houston. And he goes to a team that's on the come up. I mentioned before in some videos, C.J. Stroud, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, decent offensive line, Laramie Tunsil, who's one of the highest paid tackles in the NFL. So, yeah, I think he'll have a good season. I don't think it'll be quite what he did last year, because while last year he did quite well, that also accounts for Joe Burrow basically getting hurt and them trying to run the ball more once that occurred. I mean, I guess if that could happen to C.J. Stroud, but this is a passing offense. This is a West Coast passing offense. Joe Mixon's not Christian McCaffrey, but he is a good pass-catching back. I think he'll get like 850 yards rushing, maybe like 300 yards receiving, so he'll get like 1,100 yards, maybe 10 touchdowns. So, good player. $42 is a good cost for him, considering the season he just had and us not really knowing what kind of season he'll have, but even on the projections, he'll have a good season. So, not a bad start to the draft. 12th overall, we took Tyreek Hill for $72. Second year in a row, Eileen has stuck with Tyreek Hill. He was on a historic pace last year. He was on a historic pace up until, I want to say, like when they played Kansas City, they kind of shut him down, but he was still going, and then it kind of fell apart, like against the Titans, and then he was out the following week. But he was gunning for 2,000 yards. He got 1,799, so 201 yards short of 2,000, which is still like crazy to consider. He had 119 receptions, so I think he was second in the league in receptions. And he was just named NFL's #1 player in the top 100, even ahead of Patrick Mahomes, which is crazy to consider. But he remains the fastest player in the NFL, even at age 30. If we're thinking like he's on the back end, like he's one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL for a good reason. His speed hasn't dissipated at all. I mean, he looks incredible. That being said, I'm not thinking he's going to get an 1,800-yard season again. Like, that's, like, just absolutely bananas. That's like Calvin Johnson, essentially Hall of Fame player for the Lions type of season. So I'm thinking more along the lines of like 14 to 1500, maybe like instead of 13 touchdowns, maybe something like 8. The thing is, Tyreek could have as big a season as he just had. I just think he's in for regression. Like, no one can keep up that kind of pace, but he might be the outlier because he really is that good. I mean, he's just an incredible, dominant player. The only guy who had more receptions than him last year, I think, was CeeDee Lamb. And for my money, I would have wanted Tyreek Hill over CeeDee Lamb, just because he's so explosive. We'll see if Miami takes a step back. I'm thinking he'll be in for some regression. Maybe, we'll get Achane more involved. Maybe we'll get Jalen Waddle more involved. There are other players on this team that are really good too. It doesn't just have to be the Tyreek Hill show. But if it is the Tyreek Hill show, then he's going to want the ball a lot. And if he gets the ball a lot, then, Eileen can blow some people out because he's that good. So do I like spending this amount of money on a receiver? Like, to give you an example, CeeDee Lamb was the number one fantasy receiver last year. He went for $61. Tyreek Hill went for a full $11 more than him in our league. But that's just how much I think people in our league respect him, how great we think he is. Like, he's just, there's not a lot of, let's check. I mean, Sarah spent 62 on Amon-Ra St. Brown, but nobody else really spent into the 60s on any receiver, I don't think, in this whole draft. So CeeDee Lamb, and then I'm checking, I know. Okay, so Justin Jefferson. So Justin Jefferson went for 60. It's probably the best deal among these guys. Amon-Ra went for 62. CeeDee Lamb went for 61. I mean, Jesus, Amon-Ra went for more than CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. Ugh. Immediately, I hate that for Sarah. I immediately hate that. Like, he's the safest player among them, but man, I would not pay for Amon-Ra St. Brown to be better than CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. But that being said, the highest paid wide receiver is this guy, Tyreek Hill, at $72, and that's because of how much people respect him and the deep ball. Like, 1,800 yards is crazy, and to imagine that he was gunning for 2,000, and he missed a game. So if he actually played all of the games, he had a shot at it. That is crazy to consider. But there are just games where Tyreek will just beat you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And so is he worth the 72? He's like one of the few wide receivers I would say that's worth the $72 because he's just that good. I mean, I had him, 2 years ago, and I got him on a discount at 45 because he had just made the move to Miami, and I'm like, I think this is going to work out. And then boom. And I'm just like, oh, okay, I think I've stumbled onto something. So Tyreek Hill is an incredible player. Tyreek Hill has a lot of kids now. I think he has like 10 kids. So he's trying to rake in that money too. So respect him. Probably the best wide receiver in the NFL right now just because of his speed. And I'm thinking he's going to have another incredible season. I just don't know if it's going to be a historic season like he just had. But, if it is, then it's worth it. Otherwise, I think you overpaid for him. Just a little bit, just a tad. Like, especially considering no one else went to the 70s on a wide receiver. Number 24 overall, $35, Josh Jacobs. So, I want to say 2 years ago, Josh Jacobs was the leading rusher, was the rushing champ in the NFL. He led the league in rushing. Last year, he was like the 26th ranked fantasy running back, and he was holding out for a new contract, and they just gave him a franchise tag in Vegas. So he's 26 years old. He's now in Green Bay replacing Aaron Jones, who I love. He's one of only 5 backs with at least 50 targets in the last 3 years. I think he'll have a heavy workload. I don't know if he'll. I mean, I dislike Matt LaFleur a lot for years and years. It was just like, oh, let's just try and make A.J. Dillon a thing. Oh, let's just make Jamal Williams a thing. I'm just like, give the ball to Aaron Jones. He's right there. Just give him the ball. And now, finally, A.J. Dillon, okay, unfortunately, he's out for the season. He's hurt. That sucks. Jamal Williams is gone. And finally, a running back has a chance to get a heavy workload, and it's not Aaron Jones because they got rid of him. Like, how free, there's no justice sometimes, and it's just freaking ridiculous that Aaron Jones leaves the very year they actually are going to make whoever they have be the bell cow back. Like, that's so Matt LaFleur. Like, just, I hate that. I hate that. So, they drafted Marshawn Lloyd. Maybe he'll get some work, but he's hurt right now. I mean, Emmanuel Wilson's a backup, but he's not great either. So it's going to be the Josh Jacobs show for the time being, and probably for the whole season. And getting a workhorse running back, a bell cow running back for $35, well done. That is a very, very great pickup for you. I project he'll have more carries because they're going to need him. He's going to get his 1,000 yards. He's going to get like his 40 receptions. He's going to get like his 10 touchdowns. He's probably like a $45 to $50 player, and you got him on the cheap at $35. You got a nice, sweet little discount because nobody was sure what to make of Green Bay. But A.J. Dillon's gone. Marshawn Lloyd is hurt. Ain't got nobody in the backfield. It's Josh Jacobs' time, and that's super annoying that we finally have a workhorse running back in Green Bay after years of suffering and waiting for Aaron Jones to be the guy. Then not 8 years of them not paying that off. Like, just it infuriates me that LaFleur did him dirty like that. It still infuriates me. So, good pick in a good situation. Hate the coach. So, if the Packers fail, I'll be happy because I want Matt LaFleur gone just for what he did to Aaron Jones for all of these years. That's why they never won a Super Bowl, by the way. So, 27 overall, $22, Jalen Hurts. So he spent the most money on a quarterback. The second most was Patrick Mahomes at 18. Third was Josh Allen at 15. I would take Josh Allen at that price over the other two, but I don't mind Mahomes because he could have an MVP season. Hurts was very good last year. He tied for the rushing touchdown lead with Josh Allen with 15 rushing touchdowns. That's a crazy amount of rushing touchdowns. But in the second half of the season, Eagles were real bad. So bad that they eventually lost the wild card round of the Bucs. So he was the number 2 fantasy quarterback, but he really fell apart towards the end. And I think it'll also hurt them losing Jason Kelce, so Travis Kelce's older brother, who was the center for the Eagles. He just retired. So I think that'll hurt him too. But I still think he's developing. I still think Nick Sirianni is like figuring it out, especially they brought in a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, and they brought in Saquon Barkley. So hopefully they can get things turned around because like the first 13 games of the year last year, they were like 11-2. They were dominant. And then it just all fell apart, and they lost the division, they lost the wild card round, everything went south. But I mean, I also chalk that up partially to the Super Bowl hangover. So I'm thinking 3,600 yards passing. I'm thinking maybe around 21 touchdowns. I think less interceptions, so maybe like 10. Maybe around the same amount of like yards rushing, maybe around 500. And then maybe an extra like 10 rushing touchdowns. 15's a lot, man. Like, that's a lot of rushing touchdowns. Like, at some point, you got to stop treating the guy like Cam Newton and just give the ball to Saquon. You're paying Saquon, use Saquon. Like, if Saquon actually got most of the goal line touches, Saquon would be like a top 3 fantasy back. But Jalen Hurts keeps getting most of the goal line touches, and it's super annoying. So, especially because they're putting him at risk. And we want to mitigate that risk. Like, he's a good runner. We want to use him to run, but there's no reason to use him to run all of the time. Like, that's silly. You shouldn't do something all of the time because it does not mitigate the risk. It increases it. So, yeah, we went kind of ham on the first 4 players. I think you meant to take 3 of those players. I don't think you really meant to take Jalen Hurts because he's a very, very good dude. One of the highest character guys in the NFL. But another team that went like pretty big in the top four players on their roster. So he spent $171 on 4 players. So then we just kind of went cheap. And so, yeah, we took Jordan Addison. I guess we can go through some of the. We don't need to go through some of the criminal stuff. I don't like. It's distasteful. So Jordan Addison, took him in the first round last year out of USC. He was the Adam Thielen replacement, and he's the guy playing next to Justin Jefferson. So we are hoping to develop him into the number 2. KJ Osborne's gone. Funny enough, he's over in New England now. Wow, that's weird how that happened. So he's the number 2. Not real hopeful about it because Sam Darnold is the quarterback. I'm not really a big Sam Darnold fan. So he's kind of like a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 kind of guy. I don't even count him as a flex. We'll say 70 receptions, 850 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think he had like 10 touchdowns last year. I don't think you're going to get that. I just don't. They're going to take a step back in their passing because Sam Darnold isn't as good as Kirk Cousins. Nothing that I've seen from Sam Darnold tells me that Sam Darnold is even an average NFL quarterback. Nothing he has done his entire career tells me he's even an average NFL quarterback. So, yeah, I think Addison probably belongs on someone's bench and not in someone's starting lineup. But there's the possibility he has a third-year breakout if Darnold actually, makes good on his talent after all this time. I very am hesitant about that, but, maybe. 80 overall, $9, Jameson Williams. So I don't think he's a felon. He just got suspended for gambling for like 6 games, which I guess is bad. But anyway, so he's like the wide receiver 2 in Detroit. We've been waiting on him to like become something for a while now. Dirty little secret, that's probably one of the worst Lions draft choices the past few years under like Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. Some of their other ones, Laporta's worked out. Jahmyr Gibbs has been nice. Their offensive lineman picks are good, like Penny Sewell. I love Penny Sewell. I know everyone talks about Jamar Chase. I would take Penny Sewell. Penny Sewell is incredible. But Jameson Williams has only played like 18 of like 34 games. Between the suspension, him coming off an ACL tear, him not having any sort of like route tree or being able to run any sort of routes. He's fast. He can run fast. That's cool, I guess. But it's kind of crazy. Like everyone says Ohio State is wide receiver U or like, and they're not. Like, for my money, I think Alabama would be wide receiver U, especially if you look at the lineage, like Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Smith. Goodness gracious. Just going back to, like, Julio Jones starting the trend, like, there's so many guys. Like, Tua in that, like, 2018 National Championship game, that entire receiving core is, like, all first-round picks. Like, think about that. Like, Jerry Jeudy's there. Like, Henry Ruggs, unfortunately. But, yeah, he was a first-round pick, too. Like, just crazy deep at receiver. But all that's to say, like, I just am surprised that Jameson Williams doesn't have, like, a full route tree, considering the type of talent that guy is around just at Alabama. Like, you would think he would be able to run routes like Devontae Smith or, like, some of these other cats, and he doesn't. He's just, like, he's a dangerous playmaker who can get deep on a go route, but can he run a comeback? Does he know how to run an out route efficiently? Does he know how to dip his hips and do a good crossing route? He doesn't do any of the nuance. It's like he's super duper raw. And there are guys you can develop, but like if you're the 12th overall pick, you shouldn't be that raw. So I don't know what was going on. I guess maybe the ACL injury really affected him, possibly, but still, I'm just like something is weird about this. Anyway, all that is to say. He's been passed up by Sam Laporta. He's been passed up by Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Like, there are other weapons in this Detroit offense, but considering the level of talent and investment they put in him, like, he's got to do something this year. Like, there's no more excuses. Like, the team went to the NFC Championship game, and now, you know, you pay the O-line, you pay Jared Goff, you drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, you paid Amon-Ra St. Brown, you paid David Montgomery. Like, you're going to need to not be able to pay somebody. You need some cheap production from somewhere. You know, Josh Reynolds is gone. They put, like, Tim Patrick and freaking my guy Allen Robinson II on the practice squad. Jameson Williams has got to develop now. Like, you don't have a choice. It's sink or swim time. So, he's got the possibility of being something. He's always had the talent. That's what's infuriating. He has the talent to be a number one receiver. He's got the speed. He's got the height. I know he's got the pedigree. Can he actually put it together? We'll find out. In the meantime, I'm going to split the baby. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it since he was at Alabama, and that's bad. Like, I'm waiting and waiting, but he's just not shown anything. So, maybe 800 yards, maybe 4 touchdowns, but, like, this is the Amon-Ra Jahmyr Gibbs show, and until Jameson Williams actually efficiently runs routes and earns Jared Goff's trust, there's no real reason to be spending this kind of coin on him. Like, there were better players at receiver to get for, like, decent prices. Like, basically what I just described to you is, like, a little worse than, like, Evan Ingram, who just went to Charlie's team for, like, $5. And Evan Ingram, by the way, was, like, the number 3 fantasy tight end last year. So I get it. Like, tight ends aren't, like, sexy picks. But, like, I'd rather have that. I'd rather have Zay Flowers for $9. I mean, Ladd McConkey, I don't even know too much about. He's $3. I mean, Oyos Mio. Just going through, like, different teams in these drafts that I've been looking over. So many. Like, I know where everyone is now, but it's still just like, there's a lot of things to keep track of. But, you know, Sam Laporta went for $8. Like, Laporta's higher on the pecking scale than Jameson Williams. What we doing paying that much for Jameson Williams? Trey McBride went for $8. Any of those Packers receivers, I probably would have rolled the dice on between Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Dontayvion Wicks. I would have rolled the dice on any of the 4 over this. So, yeah, don't love it. He's also starting your lineup. I feel like he's a bench guy. He's not very good. 94 overall, $5, Devin Singletary. This is another steal of a running back. I'm surprised some of these running backs who are starting went this low, but you didn't bother to get the handcuffs to any of your running backs. Like, Joe Mixon's handcuff is Dameon Pierce. I think he's still a free agent. Josh Jacobs' handcuff is Marshawn Lloyd, who Leyland drafted, then mysteriously dropped, and then Justin spent quite a bit of coin on. And then I think Tyrone Tracy is Singletary's handcuff, and Lauren definitely has him. So I don't know why you didn't get any of the handcuffs to any of your backs, considering running backs get hurt all the time. But essentially, Singletary's a good player. I mean, he's replacing Saquon Barkley. I have very little faith in Daniel Jones and this Giants offense. I think Brian Dable is being set up to fail, and it's dumb, and I don't agree with it. But, yeah, what's that to say? It means Singletary's probably going to get a lot of touches. He was kind of pedestrian last year, but he, funny enough, took the starting job away. Like, he went to Houston to, like, be the backup to Dameon Pierce, ended up taking the job halfway through the season, and he's very consistent. He's about an average running back who's very durable. He never gets hurt. He's not a great pass catcher, but he's a tough runner, and this may be a below average offense, but someone has to score. Like, you can't just not score the whole season. So I think he'll get around 800 yards. I think he'll get around 6 touchdowns. I think he'll get, like, maybe 35 receptions. And that's like an RB3. That's like a flex-worthy RB3 type of player. And to get that for $5, even if he's, like, the 31st fantasy running back like he was last year, it's really good. That is a good piece of business because running backs are hard, and getting that on the cheap is a good job. Now, I don't know why you didn't, again, get the handcuffs to any of your running backs, but, you're going to do what you do. So, what have you. Moving right along, 196, Jakobi Meyers for $1. He looked good at the start of last year. He was like the 20th fantasy wide receiver through like 8 weeks. And then McDaniels got fired, rightfully so. That Chargers game was just terrible. But yeah, his production basically dipped after that. He's a nice number 2. He's a flex-worthy-ish receiver. He had 800 yards last year and 8 touchdowns. I'm thinking he'll get around 800 yards and half that, 4 or 5 touchdowns. Really, I think they're just going to take a step back because I don't really know what to make of Gardner Minshew. Is this really going to be for all of McDaniel's faults, they still try to push the ball downfield with Jimmy G. They're not going to push the ball downfield with Gardner Minshew. I guess they could throw it to Davante Adams, but I have my suspicions. So, I like Myers as a bench piece. He could occasionally be a starter. I think he was a starter for part of the season last year for Patrick. He's a good $1 bet in case Davante Adams does get traded at midseason. But the Raiders ought to be rebuilding, and I don't know if Gardner Minshew can use him properly or even what he'll look like in this offense, to be honest. I think this is going to be a run-heavy offense. I also don't like the offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy, either. He did a bad job with Justin Fields. This whole Raiders offense thing is not great. I like Davante Adams, genuinely. He's trapped in a bad situation, and that bad situation is the Raiders let's was Jakobi Meyers, but, he's worth the bench slot. He'll occasionally be able to start. Let's see. You took Myles Gaskin, who's the kick returner for the Vikings, so I don't know why we did that. 219 Rashid Shaheed. He's a former undrafted free agent. He's on the Saints. He's probably their number 2 now, finally, with Michael Thomas gone because of injuries. So he's the number 2 behind Chris Olave. I don't know how valuable that is because, first, Dennis Allen's a bad coach. Second, they got rid of Pete Carmichael and brought in a new offensive coordinator, but I don't really know if they're going to actually turn up the passing game. Let's see, who is the Saints offensive coordinator anyway? Let's see, Saints OC. Saints OC. Clint Kubiak. Oh, I know him. So that is Gary Kubiak's son, who's the former Minnesota Vikings offensive coordinator and was recently an analyst with the 49ers. So another Shanahan/McVay coaching tree guy. I like Kubiak. I don't know if he's going to be able to fix this offense. That O-line looks bad. But I digress. Shaheed's the number 2. Maybe he can do something if the Saints actually turn around this offense and becomes something. But more or less, I just think he's a boomer bust player. Maybe 750 yards, maybe 55 receptions, maybe 4 touchdowns. It's not a lot. We're not looking for a lot from Shaheed because Saints offense hasn't been good since Drew Brees retired. It's slow, everybody's old or injured, and it's very methodical and uninteresting and not very well thought out, I guess we'll say. So I have my doubts about Shaheed, but I guess you can keep him on your bench. And then I'm not even going to get to the rest, Carson Steele's an undrafted fullback who made the Saints. Cool. Kyle Jezik. Yeah, Kyle Jezik. I know his wife makes sweaters, actually. Very cool. But, yeah, he's not going to get the ball that much. You can cut him. And then Jahan Dotson got traded by Washington to the Eagles, and he's basically going to be their slot receiver, so not worth anything either. I'd cut all 3 of those guys. I'd cut Gaskin, too. We could have gotten the handcuffs. We could still get one of the handcuffs in Dameon Pierce and then kind of just rebuild the bench with whatever. But, yeah, I got this team as, the 13th best team in the league because, basically this team, as we say with basically Eileen and Charlie every year, the team has no depth. Like, we have no depth at running back. We basically have, 3 usable running backs, and they're all in the starting lineup. The bench could be just, you could dump the entire bench and it wouldn't really matter. I guess you could keep Jakobi Meyers. I guess you could keep Shaheed, but even then, I'm just like, eh. But it has no depth. I don't believe in Jameson Williams. I think he's going to be a bust. And if he's a bust, then I guess you're starting Jakobi Meyers, but it's not like these are great options. Addison might be suspended at some point for his DUI in the offseason. I mean, the good news is hopefully Mixon, Jacobs, and Hurts are all good and healthy. And if they're all good and healthy, you got a shot, I suppose, at doing something. I'm sure as long as the team is healthy, the team will relatively do well, whatever that might mean. But I don't really have any belief in this team's ability to kind of get through the season. I think, Eileen's made the playoffs 2 years in a row. Those are the only 2 times Eileen's ever made the playoffs in 10 years. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be 3 years in a row. You can only keep the injury bug at bay for so long and not have any sort of real, plan. I mean, we go through this, Charlie and Eileen do this every single year. They don't spend enough on running back. It's the same story every season. Get more running backs. Don't want to do it. Team gets injured. Team falls apart. That's it. I remember there was a season Charlie started 7-0, and I was just like, you need to get some running backs. And she's like, oh, the team's doing well. And then the team literally, I think she lost her last 8 games in a row because her running backs got injured. So, same story, different year. Nothing changes. I know Eileen's playing a different game. I get it. So, she's not playing to win. That's fine. But, yeah. I think Jacobs, Tyreek Hill are good players. I think Joe Mixon's in a good situation. I think Jalen Hurts is one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league. So you play Eileen early in the year, she might beat you because the starters are really good. You play her later in the year when guys start getting injured and attrition starts catching up, then you'll probably beat her pretty easily. So that's usually how it goes. It's the same story every year. We'll see what happens. I will say Tyreek Hill by himself can win games. So if he's having a historic season, it's going to suck to see Eileen trotting out some backup running back getting nothing and her still beating you because Tyreek Hill is that good. But here we are. So you got to hope that Mixon and Jacobs stay healthy. You really got to hope that Tyreek Hill continues to stay healthy. But I think Tyreek and Jalen Hurts will at least keep this team interesting for a while. Neither of them really have any injury issues. Both of them are in the prime of their careers. Both of them are excellent at their positions, top 2 basically fantasy players. So it's really about can Mixon and Jacobs kind of drag you through the season healthy. And I have a hard time believing that. Also Singletary too, got a real hard time seeing that happening. But hey, I mean, every once in a while you see Haley's Comet. So, but yeah, that's why I got this team 13th. You need running back depth. You need it. And you don't even really have that much wide receiver depth. There's no depth. So any sort of injury, the team just burp, and down goes the Titanic. So, yep, putting this team at 13. I'm probably going to call it for the night. I'll do my own video at some point before the first game on Thursday. But yeah, we got Eileen at 13th, her team of felons.